Welcome, everybody, to episode 7 of the Broad Reach podcast. And thanks a million for tuning in again. So we just want to reflect on the fact that we had a brilliant interview with Guy DeBoer. We had a massive reaction. We got loads of feedback. And we just want to say thanks again to Guy for doing the interview with us. It was amazing. So thanks everybody for sharing it as well. We got big feedback. And one thing we wanted to say was we've been getting some messages on Instagram and Facebook and stuff. But if there's anything that people want us to cover in the episodes specifically, maybe just let us know in the comments on YouTube if you don't mind. So thanks a million for tuning in again. This is episode 7. The GGR, there's a lot happening. There's a lot of action in one of the most infamous places on earth for sailing around Cape Horn. Very exciting things happening. We've got 4 skippers left in the race. And Sean, I'm going to hand it over to you if you want to let us know the latest news in the race. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm just going to share my screen, Shane. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot. I have quite a lot of tabs open, and I may or may not get to them all. Let's see. So we're going to try something a little bit different this week. It may go wrong, but some of it may work. So let's have a crack.
Excellent.
Okay, so the first kind of obvious thing, Shane, is Kirsten and Abhilash are both around Cape Horn. Kirsten was first around. Amazing achievement. It was a brilliant moment, and it was captured in a video slash audio call that the lighthouse keeper in Cape Horn recorded and sent to Kirsten's team, and that's on YouTube. It's really amazing, and we actually shared it on our Facebook. So anybody that hasn't seen it, would recommend you search for that on YouTube. You'll need a little bit of Spanish or stick on the captions translated into English to listen to what's going on, but it's a really nice moment. Abhilash then was second around. He had a little bit of a trickier time. You can see his track here where he went really close to the coast of Chile, and it was a little bit worrying because there was westerly winds coming. I actually have something I prepared a little bit earlier on this. So does this functionality as well to play back the where the different boats were. You can see this is about a week ago or a little bit more. And we just play this and see actually what happened. So they were kind of similar distances from the coast. That's Kirsten and Abhilash. But then as time moved on, Kirsten stayed wide of the coast and Abhilash, excuse me. We'll just speed this up a little bit. He got very close to the coast here. Not sure why. If anybody does know why, please let us know. But that's a question I haven't seen an answer to. I wanted to get it across to Don in the Q&A. I don't know. He hasn't done that Q&A yet, and I think I've missed the cutoff. But you can see here at this point, he got really, really close to the coast, and he was on hourly alerts where they were tracking his progress every hour. Giving weather and that to Abhilash to make sure that he got out of that spot safely, which he did, thankfully. But it was a little bit precarious. But we're trying to understand really why did he not come south here earlier, and that's something would really love to know. So if anybody does know that, stick something into the comments and let us know.
Sean, can you just explain to people before you move on, what's the reason it's very dangerous to get so close to the coast around Cape Horn?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like this southwestern coast of Chile is what's called a lee shore, which means the prevailing winds and swell are blowing up against this coast pretty much all the time, or a majority of the time. If you get stuck in here and like essentially where Abhilash was, and you've got a westerly swell and westerly winds of a significant force, and he had like up to 40 knots at least if memory serves me correctly, you may not be able to escape, even with your engine. So it is possible you could end up like the really critical scenarios that you end up on the shore essentially, and you can't escape from it. That's essentially the danger of Cape Horn. It's why it's so bad, and it's why the race and Don, they have a waypoint out here somewhere where you have to stay outside that, so it keeps you off the actual shore. Kirsten did it. She went down. You can actually, I remember specifically where she took this detour, and I remember Don was questioning on one of the tracker updates, but it was just to give herself a bit of sea room. If you imagine that the prevailing winds are westerly and the prevailing swell is westerly, this just allows you margin for error, Shane.
And that lee shore, I suppose, Sean, leads into what happened with Simon recently. If you want to talk a little bit about that.
I do. I'm having a little difficulty here. Yes, I do.
So we know
there was a call chain with Don, where Simon was trying to explain. He was trying to come out of the anchorage that he was in, or the port that he was in Chile. But then he realized he was going to have a similar problem to what Abilash had here, but further north. So up here. And he had to double back. And I'm just going to play a little snippet of the phone call between Simon and Don, and I'm going to zoom in on another chart. I have an electronic chart of the actual area, and I'll zoom in as the clip is playing.
Which side of the entrance, north or south?
It's on the southern end, on the top of the island, which is the southern island of the pass you sailed out.
Okay, Guateca or something.
Yeah, Isla Guateca. So Isla Golf Uniform Alpha India Tango Echo Charlie Alpha.
Yeah, I can see. I mean, I have a chart now, a paper chart. I can see an anchorage on the middle of the southern side of that.
Yeah, the anchorage is, once you're in the bay, it's on the western end of the bay. It's on the western corner of the bay. And it's 3 miles wide.
Okay.
So I hope that made sense. I just kind of thought that was a really interesting phone call, Shane. Don was essentially bringing Simon in here to this anchorage. And I think Simon originally thought it was maybe on this one here, on this side. But they did clarify it, and eventually Simon got in there, and he was in there for a number of days. So yeah, I just thought it was a really nice little call and a nice excuse for me to get the chart out. So yeah, that was Simon. He stayed here for a few days. He waited until he'd favorable conditions, and then he's moved out. So he's back on track now. If we look up, you can see here he had headwinds for a few days, needed to tack, and now I think he's probably got westerlies. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, northwesterly. So he's got a good wind angle now to make it down to Cape Horn. Excellent. We have a weather alert for Gug. So Gug got some updated weather today from Don and the team. He's got a front coming through here, some quite strong winds, and that's going to continue for the next couple of days. So we need to kind of monitor what's going on there with Gug. I also remember, Shane, you had a specific prediction on Gug. So I don't know, maybe you want to tell everybody what your prediction was. This is probably going back a month. I think you originally told me about this.
Yeah, well, going back, I have a few notes here. I'm actually just looking at them on my screen. They're notes from the Notes app on my iPhone, but I'm looking at them on my laptop. So on the 15th of, let me see here. On the 21st of November, the distance between Simon and Gug was 1,189 nautical miles. And on the 15th of February, the distance from Simon to Goog was 958. Except Simon was anchored where you were just looking on the chart, and Captain Goog was passing to the west of him. It's just, I suppose these notes, I've just been keeping notes on distances because I'm kind of fascinated with, we know like sometimes the distances are, we've seen people like hit flat cams and the distances like chop down, and then they open up leads again. Like Abalash was doing really consistent sailing for a while, and but obviously Simon's consistency was in another, and he was very lucky as well. I mean, let's be honest about it, with some of the weather at the beginning of the race. But my prediction was Goog was so consistent, Captain Goog. And I was predicting him to win the whole race. That was my prediction. It's a brave, it's a crazy prediction, but it's, you know, when you look at the attrition of this race, anything could happen. Anything could happen, you know. Yeah, look, I was predicting him to win back in November. So I think we just wanted to share that. But anything could happen at this stage. Obviously, Kirsten she's doing unbelievably well. And the fact that Kirsten saved Tapio in the middle of the race, I know she's winning after rounding Cape Horn, and Abalash with everything that he's been through in the previous race. Like the stories, I know Don mentioned it in one of the recent tracker updates, and he hit the nail on the head. And I think that's one of the reasons we made this podcast. Like the stories in this race behind every skipper, they're just remarkable. You know, I sent a message to Kirsten. You know, I've been messaging Kirsten's Instagram, the people who are managing her account, and I was jokingly saying, who's going to play her in the movie, you know? But it's true. Like someone's going to make a movie about all these people. But yeah, that was a bit of fun. Just my prediction on Captain Goog. Well, he's coming right up. That's the conclusion of our story. Like he has come right up with his consistency and other people falling out and stuff. So it's interesting. I know Simon wanted to round Cape Horn at the same time as, you know, Motissier. That was one of the things I think he was disappointed he wasn't going to get to do. But I kind of liked that he said that, you know. That's the legend.
Can you see this speed log, Shane?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, look, what you've been saying, you know, it tallies up in this. I mean, Kirsten is still doing really well, but Goog really is doing well. If you look at Goog compared to Abalash, okay, it's not a massive difference, but he's holding his own, if not gaining slightly. He's definitely, I mean, obviously Simon's out of the GGR itself, but he's in Chichester. But you can see here, this is when he was in that anchorage. So basically, like, again, this is such a brilliant, I love this diagram. Straight away, it tells so many stories. Yeah, I really like this. I want to go through one other thing, Shane, because we've talked about this before. You mentioned Tapio sinking. I watched a 2.5 hour or 2 hour long discussion between Tapio and his colleagues who helped him design and rebuild the boat, naval architects, and Don. And they were discussing what happened, or what did they think happened to the boat. It is absolutely fascinating. It's incredibly detailed. I really suggest people go back and watch that. But one of the things that myself and yourself, Shane, talked about is the life raft, and how do the life rafts work. And I just was preparing just a couple of images here, and I have a video as well, which I'm going to show you. But this is an image of a life raft. This is kind of one that would be on a ferry, but they all operate kind of similarly. You have your life raft here. it's obviously tied down to the deck so that it's not moving around. If there's a swell or the boat gets rolled, it doesn't fall off the boat, which actually did happen in Guy's case. But that's the purpose of this lashing here. Now, there's a really clever system here in that if this boat, which is the blue piece here, if that boat actually sinks, this life raft will deploy fully automatically itself without anybody intervening. Okay, and I'll explain how that works. So there's a thing called a hydrostatic release, which is triggered by water pressure. So I'll try to get the steps right on this. When the boat gets submerged, about, I think it's greater than 1.5 meters, something like that, there's a membrane in this, and the water pressure will move this membrane up, and a spring-loaded knife will cut this strong black and white line. Okay, that'll happen automatically. And what happens is that releases this lashing. So now the life raft is no longer being strapped down to the boat, and the life raft will float up. Okay. Now, when it reaches the end of this, it's still connected via this weak link, which is connected to this strong point via this rope here on the left-hand side, that kind of gray and blue specked rope. That's called a painter line. When it reaches the end of that painter line, the buoyancy of the life raft will pull against the boat that's sinking, and that will deploy the life raft. Okay, so it'll automatically inflate. What will then happen is you've got the pressure of the boat sinking, the blue boat. You've got the buoyancy of the life raft pulling up against that, and that will force pressure on this weak link, and that weak link will break, and the life raft will float to the surface with the painter line. Does that make sense?
Wow, that's amazing. Like, the square life rafts that some of the GGR, well, all of the GGR people have, that you see up on deck, do they have a mechanism like this?
I would expect so. Now, I'm not sure about that, but I have seen them. They're very common on boats. They're common on smaller boats. I've seen them at least. Whether it has this exact setup, I don't know.
And when we interviewed Guy Debord, actually, it wasn't when we interviewed him. It was another podcast he did, I think. Oh, it was when he did the walkthrough of his boat. I noticed that he said that he didn't have room at he had the life raft down below on his boat because of issues with room and stuff. Is that okay to have a life raft down below, or?
Don actually addressed that question. I think it was in the Q&A. They don't intervene. I think the rules, I'm not sure exactly what the notice of race states, but I do know that their view is if the skipper feels it's safer to have it down below, then they go with that.
Okay.
Some skippers choose to have it on deck. Some choose kind of a system like this where it's in a cradle and it's lashed on with a hydrostatic release. It's different on every boat, and it's up to the skipper, as I understand, to do it. I know that when Tapio didn't use this system, he manually deployed it. Now, whether he had the system or not, I actually don't know. But what he would have done is, these systems, you don't need to wait for it to automatically deploy. You can just take this painter line and attach it to a strong point and undo this part here. That's another thing that you can do in advance if you've got time. And his time was limited, but we do know that he attached this this line to the boat with a slip knot. That slip knot actually slipped, and the raft floated away. So while he was deploying it manually, it didn't quite work out, but he was lucky enough to be able to jump onto the raft.
Right, that is.
I'm going to play a little video of how this operates, Shane. I'm just going to see if it works. Okay. This is dramatized, and we are not sponsored by Hammer H20 hydrostatic release mechanisms, just in case anybody's wondering. Although, if Hammer wants to reach out to us and sponsor the podcast, we would be delighted. So let me have a crack at this and see if it works, just for the laugh.
When submerged, Hamar H20 hydrostatic release units will automatically set free a sinking vessel's life rafts. The raft's release hook is connected by the H20 strong rope to the strong point. The raft painter line is attached by a shackle to the H20 weak link connector. At 1.5 to 4 meters below the surface, water pressure acts on a membrane in the H20, releasing a spring-loaded blade that instantly cuts through the strong rope. The raft can now float free of its cradle. The raft's painter line is pulled out of the container as it heads towards the surface. When the painter line reaches its limit, the raft inflates, bursting out of its container. The increased buoyancy of the inflating raft pulling on the painter line breaks the H20 weak link that secures the line to the strong point. The inflating raft is free to rise to the surface and be boarded.
So that's pretty much it.
Excellent.
I was watching James Bond movie the other night, No Time to Die, and I was glad to see that the hydrostatic release on the boat that they were in that sunk actually worked, and the life raft popped to the surface. So I thought whoever did the research on that knew what they were doing. But yeah, anyway, that's that.
It's amazing technology.
Incredible.
Yeah, I think one thing that we have to say in this episode, Sean, before we move on, is just how amazing Kirsten and Abalash are to have rounded the horn now, you know. That's definitely one thing that we have to salute them for everything that they've gone through. And Abalash had a close call as well.
Unbelievable. Absolutely incredible. And speaking of, I have one final tab, Shane, before we wrap up, that I want to show you, which is, I think it's been there all the time, but it's somebody posted about it either in the GGR discussion group or on the official website, and it's basically this, the timeline. Have you seen this?
Yeah, it's really,
cool.
really good. So
this has got all the key events that have happened, you know, red for a kind of more critical situation. That's Guy Forteventura. We talked about it in the interview last week. Ian passes Lanzarote. Captain Coconut retires. So every major event right up until a couple of days ago is on this. It's on the GGR website. Highly recommend that people check it out. And very handy for us as well in terms of doing research for the episodes and trying to figure out when different things happened. So that's the last piece, Shane.
That's excellent. Yeah, we highly recommend people check that out, and obviously check out the tracker if you haven't done that. And if you want to go back to some of our first episodes, we explain about the tracker and using it. It's brilliant. It's and you'll be totally hooked on it. So yeah, just before we finish up, Sean, I suppose we just want to say, you know, we promised to do a big update on Jeremy, Ian, and Guy as well, he's totally out of the GGR now, but he's doing his own thing. That's Guy Waits. And we want to talk a little bit about Pat Lawless, our friend. He's on his way back with his boat from Cape Town, so he's on a big trip back. And yeah, like if anybody has any comments, please leave comments on the YouTube if you have anything in particular you want us to talk about. And you can join us for episode 8 next week. So thanks a million for watching.
Cheers, folks.